The court's plan to resume its probe into the Duterte administration's drug war.
A court in the Philippine province of Tarlac junks the illegal assembly and malicious mischief charges against dozens of farmers and their supporters.
Russia defaults on its foreign debt for a first time in a century.
And Ukraine's president tells G7 leaders he wants to finish his country's war with Russia by the end of this year.
Good evening, I'm Tony Velasquez.
And I'm Pia Gutierrez.
On our broadcast tonight, the Philippine Justice Secretary hits back at the International Criminal Court after one of its prosecutors seeks to reopen its probe into the country's bloody anti-narcotics campaign. The prosecutor and several Philippine lawyers believe the Duterte government has not conducted a genuine investigation itself. Mike Navallo has tonight's top story.
While he respects the opinion of International Criminal Court prosecutor Karim Khan, Justice Secretary Menardo Guevara says Khan should have waited for the Philippine government's efforts to investigate the drug war killings to bear fruit before seeking to continue his office's probe. The Justice Department chief said an investigation of this magnitude and complexity cannot be finished in a few months. The Philippine government in November last year asked the ICC to defer its probe on the situation in the Philippines as it conducts its own proceedings. But more than 7 months on, Khan said Friday the Philippine government failed to show it investigated or is investigating crimes within the jurisdiction of the ICC. Various groups are claiming, and former ICC prosecutor Fatu Bensouda found basis to believe crimes against humanity may have happened in the Philippines, not just when President Rodrigo took office as president, but even during his time as mayor and vice mayor of Davao City since 2011, when the Philippines became party to the Rome Statute that created the ICC. Khan noted that the DOJ's Drug War Review panel merely conducted a desk review of the cases by looking into the records. For lawyer Ruben Carranza, senior expert at the International Center for Transitional Justice, the Philippines had almost 8 months to substantiate its claim that it is investigating the killings. But even Khan said the Philippine government failed to provide details when pressed for additional information as to the kind of investigations it is doing. Carranza says the burden is on the Philippines as the party requesting the deferral of the ICC probe.
There's no effort from the Philippine government to find out if all these thousands of killings, by its own admission, there were thousands of killings, follow a pattern that might constitute crimes against humanity. So Philippine government did not submit a single document that shows there is an investigation into the 2011 to 2016 Davao extrajudicial killings. Zero documents were submitted there.
Carranza believes the Philippine government had serious shortcomings.
The most charitable way to interpret what the prosecutor is saying about this deferral effort is that it was incompetent. At most, this is, I think I agree with the characterization that this was simply meant to delay the effort of the ICC to investigate these crimes against humanity.
Cristina Conti, lawyer for some drug war victims, also finds the DOJ Drug War Review lacking, but appreciates Guevara's initiative.
I think Secretary Menardo Guevara has made valiant efforts at showing that the Philippines is investigating. However, I really feel that he's alone in pursuing these accountability measures.
The most glaring deficiency, Conti notes, is the lack of participation of drug war victims in the DOJ's probe.
So even if we welcome the efforts of the government, we are at this point somewhat skeptical because there have been very few efforts to reach out to the victims.
Conti adds the investigations in the Philippines should have started a long time ago, back in July 2016, when the killings started. In February 2018, the then ICC prosecutor opened her office's preliminary examination into the situation in the Philippines, while Guevara himself announced before the United Nations Human Rights Council in June 2020 that the Philippine Drug War Review started in February of the same year. 2 years on, none of the Drug War Review reports has been released, except for the matrix of 52 cases.
Any investigation should have started the first time the first killing started, and that was in 2016. In any case, clearly this review by the DOJ is too little and too late.
For the Integrated Bar of the Philippines, the ICC probe will uncover what really happened behind thousands of killings related to the drug war. Authorities put the number of deaths at over 6,000 suspects killed in police operations, but human rights groups claim thousands more were killed by vigilantes or by unknown killers.
Kasi ang purpose naman ng investigation is to reach the truth, no? Ang katotohanan. Meron ba talagang mga nangyaring krimen na tinatawag na crimes against humanity?
It's still not clear how the entry of a new administration will affect the possibility of Duterte facing charges before the ICC, according to Carranza. He reminds the public Duterte's daughter will now be vice president, and incoming President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. had said he will not let ICC investigators come in, and the Philippines will not return as member of the ICC. Mike Navalio, ABS-CBN News.
The ICC plan to resume its Philippine drug war probe gets no immediate comment from President Duterte. He attended the Monday oath-taking of his son Sebastian, the newly elected Davao City mayor. The president instead ranted once more against big businesses, including water concessionaire operators. He also admitted using his presidential powers to seek the shutdown of ABS-CBN, the parent company of this news channel.
I use the presidential powers to tell Congress that you are dealing with scoundrels, and if you continue to kowtow with them, kawawa ang Pilipino. Kaya tinira ko talaga sila.
A court in the Philippine province of Tarlac dismisses the initial charges against a group of farmers and activists who were arrested over a land dispute. A Capas municipal judge cited a lack of evidence in dropping the illegal assembly charge. The court also junked a malicious mischief complaint against the so-called Tinang 83. It said prosecutors failed to prove that a group damaged property out of hatred, revenge, or ill motive. The court also noted that jurisdiction over the land dispute should lie with the Agrarian Reform Department. The Tinang 83 were arrested earlier this month for allegedly damaging a disputed sugar plantation. The government data later showed the farmers in the group were the rightful owners of the land. A lawyer for the Tinang 83 welcomes the Capas court ruling, but attorney Joe Clemente says their legal battle continues as 3 to 5 other charges are pending against the group.
Filipinos get a preview of the civic and military parades for the Marcos inauguration on Thursday. The rehearsals were held as authorities appealed to anti-Marcos groups to stage their protests online. Raya Capulong with the details.
Members of PNP and AFP rehearsed for a civic and military parade in front of the National Museum in Manila as part of the preparations for the inauguration of President-elect Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Military vehicles and tanks also joined the rehearsal. Policemen were deployed around the museum.
Tignan natin yung actual na paglalatag natin ng ating security forces dyan, yung mga kagamitan, yung mga kakayanan, nilatag na rin natin. At magkakaroon tayo dyan ng walkthrough. After the walkthrough, magkakaroon sila ng coordinating conference. Then magkakaroon sila ng critics. Titignan, ano ba yung mga i-adjust natin? May kakulangan pa ba?
The Philippine Coast Guard showcased its floating assets that will be deployed at the Manila Bay during the inauguration.
Alam mo, sa ganitong panahon, hindi natin pwedeng ibaliwala, no? Yung mga, kung may manggugulo talaga. So tayo lahat ng anggulo, sa lahat ng pwedeng tignan ay tayo ay nagiging alerto. At ang instruction ni Admiral Abu ay maging vigilance sa lahat ng aspeto nitong kadabigan para hindi tayo malusutan kung sakaling may magtatangka talagang manggulo at gumamit ng karagatan at ng Pasig River.
Meanwhile, the progressive group Bayan rejects the suggestion of the PNP to hold online protests instead of physical rallies on the day of the inauguration. Bayan Secretary General Renato Reyes says their protest will push through on June 30. Meanwhile, the Marcos family is on a transition process to become the first family. In a video posted on his YouTube channel, Marcos said they are all adjusting to their new lives as members of the presidential family.
Ang aking may bahay na si Lisa ay nakakalungkot man, naawa nga ako sa kanya, ay kinailangan niyang iwanan muna ang kanyang kasama sa kanyang tinayo na law firm. Si Sando naman, ganun din. Excited din bilang neophyte congressman. Yung dalawa ko pang anak, dahan-dahan nasasanay dahil marami silang bigla na security. Panay nga reklamo.
Raya Kapulong, ABS-CBN News.
Philippine President Duterte believes his successor was right to skip most presidential debates during the campaign period. Duterte recalled his own participation in presidential debates and complained he was given only a limited time to talk. He also alleged the debates benefited only the TV stations that hosted them.
During the campaign, we had a limited time to talk. And the next time that you are a candidate, you're invited to do that. Tama si Marcos. Decline. We were only given half a minute or 1 minute. And that's it. You cannot even to talk further. So, magdali ka yun. And it was for show. It earns money for them at your expense sometimes.
The U.S. Vice President's husband is leading the American government's delegation to the Marcos inauguration. Second Gentleman Douglas Emhoff will be joined by Virginia Representative Bobby Scott in the 7-member delegation. Scott is the first American of Filipino descent in the U.S. Congress. Also part of the delegation, Nanny Coloretti, said to be the highest-ranking Filipino-American in the Biden administration.
The Philippine President-elect's eldest son is sworn in as congressman in their family's stronghold, Ilocos Norte Province. Sandro Marcos took his oath as 1st District Representative at the Lawag City Centennial Arena. It was witnessed by his aunt and the President-elect's sister, Senator Amy Marcos. In a speech, the younger Marcos said his family could not attend the event due to preparations for his father's own oath-taking on Thursday, but he thanked them for their support.
Noong dumarating na ang resulta, that nervousness became one of pride and one of joy. Because I became the first Marcos to run in the 1st District of Ilocos Norte and emerge victorious. I am here, Congressman-elect Ferdinand Alexander Marcos, not just ready to serve, but now at your service.
Meanwhile, Senator Marcos's son, Ilocos Norte Governor Matthew Marcos Manotoc, also took his oath for a second term. So did Manotoc's aunt, re-elected Vice Governor Cecilia Araneta Marcos. Manotoc likewise led the oath-taking of other Ilocos Norte officials, including the mayors and vice mayors.
Re-elected Senator Risa Ontiveros officially assumes the leadership of the Philippine political opposition. Ontiveros took her oath Monday before outgoing Vice President Leni Robredo. She vowed to continue her advocacies, including efforts to improve the country's COVID-19 response and other health initiatives. She also pledged to pursue the fight against false information.
We'll fight back harder against rumors, lies, propaganda, and fake news. Let me make this even clearer. This is a stern warning to all the dubious characters in the fake news universe. This time, we will not let your reckless disregard for truth slander our democracy, our country, ever again.
Robredo assured Ontiveros that she would be ready to help her whenever needed.
Sabi ko kay Senator Risa, ikaw na yung leader namin. Kaya please know na nasa likod mo lang kami. Tutulong kung kailan mo kami kailangan.
Detained Philippine Opposition Senator Laila De Lima begins her recovery from a recent major surgery. De Lima issued a statement saying she's fine but still experiencing some pain. The 62-year-old lawmaker had an operation to remove part of her uterus. She was returned to the Philippine National Police Custodial Center in Camp Crame after she was discharged from the hospital. De Lima has been detained over illegal drug charges since 2017. Her lawyers believe the 2 remaining cases against her should be dismissed after key witnesses recanted their testimonies.
The Philippine Health Department reports 867 new cases Monday, the country's highest COVID daily tally in over 3 months. The number of active cases has breached 7,000 and is the highest since April 30. The Philippines averaged 662 new daily cases from June 20th to the 26th. Officials say this was 53% higher from the week before. Some 591 patients are in severe to critical condition. The Health Department also reports 51 deaths from that period. The hospital bed utilization rate was at 18.1%, while the ICU utilization rate was at 14.9%.
The Philippines postpones the rollout of COVID-19 booster shots for non-immunocompromised minors aged 12 to 17. It was supposed to have started over the weekend, but health officials say a recommendation from an independent advisory body prevented them from doing so. The Health Technology Assessment Council had said non-immunocompromised minors can only get boosted once an area reaches 40 to 70% booster coverage for all priority groups and the adult population. An advisor of President Duterte opposes this recommendation.
Yung age stock, sana they become more reasonable. Kasi itong mga 12 to 17 na kabataan natin na may pasok ka na sa face-to-face this August, bumayag na sila sa pagbigay ng mga bakuna dito na first booster lang naman to. At ang bagal ang galaw ng age stock. Let's move faster.
Meanwhile, a former health secretary also wants the country to step up its booster drive.
I think that we should widen the eligibility of those who can receive booster shots at this point. I can see that there are millions of vaccines that are supposed to be expiring soon. I don't know why we should not be using these vaccines to protect our people.
Up ahead, the dire situation in Sri Lanka about to get worse as its fuel is nearly depleted.
The World Tonight returns after the break.
Ngayong June 30, 2022, manunumpa na ang ika-17 presidente ng Pilipinas, Ferdinand Bongbong R. Marcos Jr. Panoorin ang live coverage mula 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. sa Kapamilya Channel.
We're back on The World Tonight. Russia defaults on its foreign debt for the first time in a century as Western countries shut down Moscow's payment channels to its overseas creditors. The payments are comprised of $100 million in interest on two bonds, one denominated in US dollars and another in euros. Russia was due to pay them on Sunday night, which marked the end of a 30-day grace period. Russia's finance ministry insists it has fulfilled its obligations, having made the payments to its onshore national settlement depository. But it is unlikely that the funds will find their way to many international holders due to sanctions that have effectively cut the country out of the global financial system. Russian officials are now accusing Western governments of forcing the country into an artificial default.
Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky says he wants the war in his country to finish by the end of 2022. Zelensky's message delivered to G7 leaders he met via video link Monday. The G7 members reiterated their support for Ukraine in its fight against Russian invaders. They also tackled plans to cap the price of Russian oil. The move aims to further limit Russia's financial capabilities as the country benefits from soaring fuel prices. Meanwhile, 4 G7 powers committed to ban Russian gold exports. These are Britain, Canada, Japan, and the US. Gold is a major export for Russia. It has also been a refuge commodity in times of turmoil, with Russia's richest rushing to convert their assets into gold as sanctions hit.
Here's the latest on the battlefront in Ukraine. Russia launched fresh attacks on Kyiv. At least one person was killed after Russian strikes hit a residential building. It's the first attack on the Ukraine capital in almost 3 weeks. Russia denies hitting a civilian target and insists it struck a weapons factory in the area. It claims the residential building was damaged by a Ukrainian air defense missile.
Russia also pushing towards Lysychansk, the last major city held by Ukraine in the eastern Luhansk province. Russian forces shifted their fight to the area after capturing its twin city Severodonetsk on Saturday. Moscow's troops are said to have entered Lysychansk and are using artillery to try to cut the city off from the south. Russian assault aircraft also struck near the city. Luhansk province and neighboring Donetsk make up Ukraine's eastern Donbas region, which is the country's industrial heartland.
G7 countries vow to raise $600 billion in private and public funds over 5 years to counter China's multi-trillion-dollar Belt and Road project in developing nations. U.S. President Biden says his country would bring $200 billion to the table, with the rest of the G7 raising $400 billion by 2027. The funds will support projects in low and middle-income countries to tackle climate change, as well as improve global health and digital infrastructure.
We need to strengthen the use of trusted technologies so that our online information cannot be used by autocrats to consolidate their power or repress their people. That's why the Digital Invest program is mobilizing $335 million in private capital to supply secure network equipment in Africa, Asia, and Latin America.
Sri Lanka on the brink of a complete standstill as the country runs out of fuel supply. Local media reports the state-run gas company's remaining fuel supply won't last for even a day. The country's public transportation is also feared to suspend operations with no fuel imports expected anytime soon. Sri Lanka has been blacklisted by international companies as the country defaulted on its debts. The government is now sending top officials to Russia to negotiate with Moscow as a potential source of its much-needed fuel supply.
Protests continue in the U.S. after the Supreme Court ended constitutional protections for abortion that had been in place for nearly a half-century. Among those condemning the court's move are Filipino-American women. The details from ABS-CBN's North America Bureau Chief, TJ Manoto.
Coast to coast, almost all major cities in the U.S. saw hundreds of thousands of protesters hit the streets after Friday's historic decision of the U.S. Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade, better known as the landmark precedent case that protected women's federal abortion rights for the last 50 years. In Washington, D.C., thousands gathered in front of the Supreme Court to express their anger and disgust at the court's ruling over the health and choice of women.
I was numb. I never thought it would come to this. I feel like this just signed the deaths of millions of folks who really need this, and this is just such a shame. And I'm pissed. I just have no words.
Many Pinay Philams are also dismayed by the decision.
I'm so disheartened that a group of mostly male judges overturned something that impacts women. And now that that right has been taken away, I just feel that now there's going to be unsafe practices that we should all be concerned. Again,
last Friday, the Supreme Court voted to overturn Roe v. Wade, saying that the Constitution does not protect women's rights to abortion, and now it will be up to states' legislatures to decide if they wish to ban abortions altogether. The 6-3 vote saw for the first time the majority conservative justices flex their power at the highest chamber of the land. U.S. President Joe Biden could not hide his dismay upon hearing the news. Biden has been a longtime supporter of the pro-choice movement, and he was quick to blame former President Donald Trump for nominating 3 extremely conservative justices to give them the supermajority.
Make no mistake, this decision is a culmination of a deliberate effort over decades to upset the balance of our law. It's a realization of an extreme ideology and a tragic error by the Supreme Court, in my view.
Safe and legal abortions has been a choice for poor and underserved minorities when faced with unplanned pregnancies, as well as those with medical conditions who had to choose their own lives over their infants, and even victims of rape and incest. According to critics, those who will be impacted the most will be poor women of color dealing with unplanned pregnancies who may be forced into deeper depths of poverty. TJ Manotok, ABS-CBN News, San Francisco, California.
The Philippine peso continues to weaken against the US dollar. The value of the local currency hit an intraday low of 55 pesos and 15 centavos versus the greenback, marking its weakest showing in more than 10 years. Economist Nicolas Mapa calls out the Philippine Central Bank amid the development. He says faster inflation and a weaker peso should be expected in the coming days as the BSP remains dovish. In an interview with Bloomberg News, incoming BSP Governor Felipe Medalla also said monetary authorities don't defend the currency. He added the BSP will allow the market to determine the value of the peso.
The PSE Index extends its rally for a second day, even as the Philippine peso slides further against the US dollar. Michelle Ong reports.
Philippine shares were steady on Monday as the peso busted out of the 55 to the dollar handle before settling back at 54. Most Asian currencies have weakened significantly against the US dollar in view of the Fed's aggressive tightening. But year-to-date, the peso's depreciation of 8% is already the worst in ASEAN. BPI's chief economist June Neri says while a more competitive currency is good in the medium term, in the short term it could hurt, as it could worsen imported inflation and de-anchor inflation expectations, which could require even more aggressive tightening from the Philippine Central Bank. He adds the Bangko Sentral should not shut the door to more aggressive rate hikes. The last thing we want to see is an off-cycle policy meeting in case the depreciation becomes unmanageable. For the day, the peso firmed up a bit at the close after hitting 55.15 earlier in the session. As for the equities market, the PSE index was steady after Friday's 2.5% bounce. The PSE index gained 1/3% to close at 62.38. In corporate stories, Manny Pangilinan shows his sweet tooth with Metro Pacific Investments buying a majority stake, 51% of the Laguna Creamery, known for the Carmen's Best Ice Cream and Holly's Milk brand, for 198 million pesos. This is part of efforts to diversify into agriculture. After the transaction, Carmen's Best becomes a subsidiary of Metro Pacific. Pangilinan says the agricultural sector presents a wide range of possibilities, from strengthening the food supply chain and augmenting the accessibility of resources for all Filipinos. The country currently imports 99% of its annual dairy requirements. Michelle Long, ABS-CBN News.
Our final word tonight is a quote from Jean-Jacques Rousseau. The greatest braggarts are usually the biggest cowards.
And that is the world tonight, the 27th of June, 2022. I'm Pia Gutierrez.
I'm Tony Velasquez from the Philippines. Thank you. Mabuhay.